The air in Vanguard's elite trauma bay was thick with the metallic tang of fear and antiseptic. General Mateo Vargas, a man once carved from granite and command, lay impossibly pale, his breath a shallow, rattling protest against an unseen enemy within. Dr. Castillo, the chief surgeon, barked orders, his face a mask of frustration as monitors screamed a relentless, failing rhythm. Beside him, Dr. Kaito, precise and rigid, consulted scans with growing alarm. Adira Diallo, a rookie nurse, her modest scrubs a stark contrast to the room's high-stakes drama, hovered near Vargas's head, a quiet observer. His peripheral perfusion feels different, she murmured, barely audible above the din, her brow furrowed with a specific concern. Castillo merely waved a dismissive hand. Nurse, monitor the vitals. We're discussing a laparotomy here. Kaito didn't even glance her way. But Adira's gaze, steady and intense, never left Vargas's weakening form. She saw beyond the failing numbers, felt a deep, chilling certainty that they were missing something crucial, something only her unique, buried experience could truly grasp. A quiet promise hardened behind her unassuming eyes, a silent vow that this man, this hero, would not be lost on her watch. The air in Vanguard Medical Center's state-of-the-art ICU hummed with the barely contained chaos of a crisis unfolding in slow motion. Gleaming chrome and polished surfaces reflected the frantic dance of medical professionals, their precise movements belying the mounting panic. Here, every instrument was cutting edge, every specialist a titan in their field, yet General Mateo Vargas lay deteriorating, a testament to the fact that even the most advanced medicine could sometimes be rendered helpless. Dr. Castillo, chief surgeon, his usually immaculate hair now slightly disheveled, paced with the restless energy of a predator denied its prey. His sharp features were etched with an anger born of frustration. The general, a man of immense public standing, was slipping away on his watch. Another unit of packed red cells, stat. Where's that bleed? The angiography was inconclusive, the exploratory laparoscopy showed nothing beyond diffuse oozing. This is impossible, he roared, his voice cutting through the sterile hum. Dr. Kaito, head of trauma, stood rigidly by Vargas's bedside, a picture of disciplined composure that belied the growing alarm in his eyes. He meticulously reviewed digital readouts, his fingers flying across a tablet. Kaito was a man of protocols, of empirical data, and Vargas's condition defied every algorithm he knew. His coagulopathy is worsening, Dr. Castillo. Despite our best efforts, his platelets are still dropping. We're chasing a ghost, he stated, his tone taut with professional vexation. Adira Diallo, a young nurse whose quiet diligence often rendered her invisible in the high-octane environment, continued her observations. Her modest scrubs were almost an ironic commentary on the opulence of the equipment surrounding them. She watched Vargas's chest, his breathing becoming increasingly shallow, an almost imperceptible flutter at the periphery of his lung. She'd noted it earlier, a subtle deviation that most would dismiss as an artifact of his overall instability. Dr. Kaito, Adira ventured softly, her voice barely a breath above the medical din, his left lower lobe seems stiff. There's a slight paradoxical movement I've been observing. Could there be some diaphragmatic irritation, perhaps? Kaito didn't even turn. He scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. Nurse Diallo, we are dealing with a profound internal hemorrhage and an escalating disseminated intravascular coagulation. A stiff lobe is hardly our priority. Stick to monitoring the 4 drips. The implicit message was clear, stay in your lane, rookie. Castillo, overhearing, merely grunted, not bothering to look up from the complex array of screens. He trusted Kaito's judgment implicitly, especially when it came to protocol. Adira felt the familiar sting of being ignored, of having her insights brushed aside. A hot flush climbed her neck, but she forced it down. This wasn't about her pride, it was about General Vargas. Minutes, then what felt like an eternity, crawled by. Vargas's condition worsened. His blood pressure dipped further, his heart rate became thready. The standard treatments, transfusions, clotting factors, were failing to stem the invisible tide. The room grew tense, the previous controlled chaos morphing into a palpable desperation. Even Castillo's bluster began to fray at the edges. Adira, however, saw something more specific. She observed a faint discoloration spreading across Vargas's flank, a pattern that resonated with images buried deep in her memory. It wasn't the typical bruising associated with internal bleeding, but something more insidious, more subtle, like an internal pressure wave. She instinctively knew this was connected to the stiff lobe and the strange peripheral perfusion. She moved closer to Kaito, her resolve hardening against the sting of past rebuffs. Dr. Kaito, this isn't typical hemorrhage presentation for an abdominal source. His flank is showing a specific marbling. And his peripheral pulses, they're weakening asymmetrically, especially on the left. Could we be looking at a retroperitoneal hematoma, perhaps pushing on the diaphragm, causing the stiffness? Her words, though phrased as a question, carried the weight of conviction. Kaito finally turned, his gaze sharp, but laced with annoyance. Nurse Diallo, your enthusiasm is noted. But we've scanned him from head to toe. There's no evidence of a major retroperitoneal bleed that would cause this level of systemic failure. And certainly not one that would be missed by our imaging. Trust the diagnostics, nurse. Trust the protocol. Your observations are anecdotal at best. He turned back to his screens, effectively dismissing her again. Castillo interjected, his voice edged with impatience. We're running out of time, Kaito. Forget the peripheral minutiae. We need to find the source and stop it. Prepare for another exploratory laparotomy. This time, we go deeper. Adira's heart sank, a cold knot of dread forming in her stomach. They were going to open him up again, looking in the wrong place. The feeling of helplessness was almost unbearable, a physical ache. She knew, with an absolute certainty honed in circumstances far grimmer than this elite ICU, that they were missing something fundamental, something her unique, buried experience had trained her to see. General Vargas, a man of quiet dignity even in unconsciousness, was dying, and the very system designed to save him was, in its rigid adherence to established norms, unwittingly letting him down. And Adira, the rookie, was powerless to stop it. Not yet, anyway. The operating theater, usually a bastion of controlled precision, now throbbed with a sickening certainty of impending failure. Dr. Castillo, his brow furrowed in intense concentration, led the second exploratory laparotomy, his movements sharp and decisive, yet increasingly frantic. Dr. Kaito, assisting, maintained a facade of calm, but Adira, observing from her position as scrub nurse, saw the subtle tension in his jaw, the rapid flicker of his eyes across the monitors. She knew, with a visceral dread that had become her constant companion, that they were looking in the wrong place. Their rigid adherence to protocol, their relentless search for a major vessel rupture, was blinding them to the true, insidious nature of General Vargas's bleeding. Adira felt a tremor run through her. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched the slow, almost imperceptible changes on the general's face, a subtle ashen shade deepening, a faint tremor beneath the skin she alone seemed to register. His blood pressure, already precarious, showed a new, ominous dip. She leaned closer to Kaito, her voice a low, urgent whisper that struggled to be heard over the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. Doctor, the perfusion pressure is dropping again. And his extremities are cooling faster than before. It feels systemic, not just localized. Kaito barely glanced at her, his focus fixed on Castillo's instruments. Monitor his vitals, Nurse Diallo. That's your role. We're identifying the source. His tone was dismissive, a cool barrier that solidified Adira's helplessness. Castillo, overhearing, merely grunted, his hand sweeping deeper into Vargas's abdomen, a frustrated frown on his face. Nothing. Still nothing obvious. The field is saturated, but no discernible major leak point. A cold knot of fear tightened in Adira's stomach. This wasn't a visible gush, it was a silent, creeping drain, a slow erosion of life from within, precisely the kind of injury she'd learned to identify in the most desperate, low-tech environments. The kind that conventional surgical training often overlooked because it didn't present with the dramatic arterial spray or obvious laceration. Then, the symphony of alarms began. A sharp, piercing wail from the arterial line, quickly joined by the rapid-fire beeps of the heart monitor. General Vargas's blood pressure plummeted, dropping below critical thresholds. His heart rate, which had been steadily climbing, suddenly became erratic, a frantic, stuttering drumbeat. The waveform on the monitor flattened, then spiked, then flattened again, a terrifying dance on the edge of oblivion. "He's crashing," Kaito shouted, his composure shattering. "BP 60 over 30. Get more blood in. Vasopressors. Now." Castillo ripped his gaze from Vargas's open abdomen, his face pale beneath the harsh surgical lights. "What the hell? We haven't even found the primary source. It's getting worse." He plunged his hands back in, a desperate, almost violent exploration. "There's too much fluid. I can't see." The room dissolved into controlled chaos, then pure panic. Nurses scrambled, anesthesiologists barked orders, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and the metallic tang of fear. Adira felt her blood run cold, a familiar adrenaline surge kicking in, the kind that had once sharpened her senses in remote, bullet-riddled villages. She saw the pattern, recognized the signature of an injury that wasn't about volume, but about pressure. "It's not a major vessel," Adira practically yelled, her voice cutting through the rising din, laced with an authority she hadn't dared use before. "It's diffuse, interstitial. Likely pressure-related from the old trauma site, a cascading failure. We need to focus on internal pressure modulation, not just external repair." Castillo spun around, his eyes blazing, fury overriding his panic. "Nurse Diallo, are you insane? This is a level 1 trauma. Step back. You are out of line." Kaito, equally distraught, pointed at the monitors. "His saturation is dropping. We're losing him. His heart is failing." The sound of the flatline alarm, a long, unforgiving tone, pierced the air, silencing all other noise for a horrific moment. General Vargas's body, already still, seemed to slump further, his face a ghostly mask. The raw, desperate edge of their failing fight hung heavy in the room. Castillo and Kaito exchanged a look of utter, profound defeat, their faces etched with stark fear. They had exhausted every protocol, every procedure, every ounce of their elite training, and it wasn't enough. They were beaten. General Mateo Vargas, the decorated hero, was slipping away, his life draining out with every relentless beep of the now failing monitors. And Adira, her heart pounding with a grief and terror that echoed battles long past, knew precisely why. But they wouldn't listen. Not yet. Isn't it amazing how often the quietest voices hold the most profound wisdom? Like Adira, many of us have felt overlooked, dismissed when we had something vital to offer. That universal struggle for recognition, for a chance to prove our worth, is at the heart of so many incredible stories. If Adira's journey resonates with you, if you believe in the power of hidden heroes, then we invite you to join our growing global community. Hit that subscribe button. Your support fuels us, helping us bring even more captivating, heartwarming, and empowering narratives to life. Let's celebrate these moments together. Welcome to our family. The long, unforgiving flatline alarm had torn through the room, a sound of utter finality. But then, as if by some invisible thread of Mateo Vargas's own fierce will, a weak, stuttering rhythm struggled back onto the monitor, a fragile, desperate flicker of life. It wasn't a recovery, not even close. It was a dying man clinging by a thread, a single, defiant beat against the encroaching darkness. And in that razor-thin moment, Adira Diallo felt the world shift on its axis. Spectra. The word, a barely audible rasp from the general's lips just moments before the flatline, echoed in her mind like a thunderclap. It wasn't a delusion from a dying man, it was a desperate summons. He knew. He had seen through her carefully constructed facade, past the ill-fitting scrubs and the demure silence. He was calling her, the ghost of a past life, a past self she had buried deep. The air in the trauma room, thick with the smell of blood and despair, suddenly thinned, sharp and cold, like mountain air before a storm. Fear, raw and primal, clawed at her throat. It wasn't the fear of combat, of bullets or shrapnel. It was the crushing terror of self-exposure, of shattering the walls she had meticulously built around her true identity. She was Adira, the quiet rookie, barely visible. To step forward now meant inviting scorn, ridicule, professional suicide. It meant unleashing Spectra, a force too dangerous, too unconventional for the sterile confines of Vanguard Medical Center. It meant facing down the very authority figures who had dismissed her as an insignificant whisper. But then, she looked at General Vargas. His face, now ghostly pale, was etched with a silent plea. His life, a symbol of courage and sacrifice, was flickering out, not because of a lack of skill from Castillo or Kaito, but because they were fighting the wrong battle. They understood standard anatomy. Adira understood what happened when standard anatomy was torn apart and forced to adapt, when conventional solutions were just a death sentence in disguise. She had seen Vargas in situations far worse, had patched him up with nothing but ingenuity and sheer will in the most impossible theaters of war. He wasn't just a patient, he was a comrade, a silent witness to her true capabilities. A powerful surge of adrenaline, cold and clear, pushed past the fear. This wasn't about her career anymore. It wasn't about humility or decorum. It was about a life, a sacred trust, and the unyielding code of Spectra that demanded action, not silence, in the face of impossible odds. The quiet nurse, Adira Diallo, began to recede, replaced by a steely resolve that radiated from deep within her core. Her hands, which had trembled with worry moments ago, now felt steady, imbued with a memory of precision and purpose. She took a single, deliberate step forward, moving past the stunned, defeated figures of Castillo and Kaito. The world seemed to slow, their expressions of shock and disbelief blurring at the edges. Her gaze fixed on Vargas, a promise in her eyes. He's not responding because you're treating the symptoms, not the true source. Adira's voice, though still soft, carried an unexpected weight, cutting through the stunned silence. It was low, firm, and entirely unlike the diffident murmur they were used to. The hemorrhage isn't spontaneous. It's a delayed, specific vascular rupture triggered by the extreme stress, connected to an old, shrapnel-damaged artery that healed imperfectly. The pressure is building externally, collapsing the vein, not internally. Castillo, still reeling from the near flatline, snapped his head towards her, his face a mask of furious indignation. "Nurse Diallo. What in God's name are you talking about? Delayed rupture? External pressure? We have a full internal bleed." He gestured wildly at the monitors, which still showed the precarious, erratic rhythm. "Step back immediately. You are a rookie nurse. Do you have any idea how grossly out of line you are?" Kaito, pale but equally incensed, pushed past the technician. "This is not a theoretical discussion, Nurse Diallo. General Vargas is dying. You are unqualified to make such a diagnosis, let alone disrupt a critical intervention. This isn't a classroom." His voice was a harsh whisper of disbelief and anger. "You don't understand the protocols involved, the gravity of this situation." Adira met their gazes, unflinching. The timid nurse was gone. In her place stood Spectra, a shadow of her former self, yet radiating an undeniable authority. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted. She didn't shout, didn't argue. She simply stated, with quiet certainty, his body is in systemic shock, but the critical pressure isn't where you think it is. You're trying to patch a gushing pipe from the inside when the problem is a blocked drain on the outside, creating a backflow. She moved closer to Vargas, her eyes already scanning, assessing, her mind racing through years of improvised repairs under fire. "We need to relieve the external pressure point, not just clamp internally. It's unconventional, but it's the only way to stop the cascade and give him a chance." Her words hung in the air, audacious and revolutionary. Castillo and Kaito stared, their faces a mixture of fury, confusion, and a flicker of something close to morbid fascination. This quiet rookie was proposing to abandon their elite, evidence-based training for a blocked drain? It was professional blasphemy. But General Vargas's life, still teetering on the precipice, remained their desperate, silent argument. The air in the air thickened, heavy with the stench of desperation and the metallic tang of blood. Just as Adira finished speaking, the relentless, piercing tone of the heart monitor spiked erratically before settling into a terrifying, elongated flatline. General Vargas's remaining color leached from his face, leaving him a ghastly pale, his breathing a shallow, ragged whisper that seemed to claw at the silence. The surgical team, already pushed to their limits, recoiled. Dr. Castillo swore under his breath, a sound of utter defeat. Dr. Kaito's shoulders slumped, his analytical mind, for the first time, seeing no logical path forward. The battle, it seemed, was lost. "We're losing him." Kaito's voice was a tight, choked gasp. Adira, however, didn't flinch. Her gaze, usually so modest, was now piercing, unwavering. She stepped closer to Vargas, ignoring the flatline, ignoring the defeated surgeons. "There's no more time for debate," she stated, her voice resonating with an authority that stunned the room into a new kind of silence. "His body is shutting down because the systemic pressure is uncontrolled. Your internal interventions are hitting a wall because the source of the cascade isn't being addressed. We must relieve the external pressure point now." Castillo stared at her, his face a roadmap of fury and incredulity. "Are you mad? You're suggesting we abandon every principle of modern surgery for some battlefield hocus-pocus?" He asked for Spectra, Adira retorted, her voice low but cutting through the tension. She gestured to the monitors, still screaming their dire message. "What you're doing isn't working. His body is rejecting it. You have no other options. Let me try." The words hum in the space between life and death. Castillo's eyes darted from Adira's resolute face to the lifeless general, then to the stunned, helpless faces of his own team. He saw their fear, their exhaustion, their utter lack of a viable alternative. Vargas's desperate whisper for Spectra echoed in his mind, a final, unexplainable plea. With a guttural sound of sheer frustration and utter surrender, Castillo slammed his fist lightly on the sterile tray beside him. "Fine," he snarled, the word ripped from his throat. "But if this kills him, nurse, your career is over before it begins." Kaito, equally aghast but equally bereft of ideas, simply nodded, a silent, grim capitulation. The room shifted, a palpable wave of tension and reluctant, desperate hope. Adira wasted no time. Her movements were fluid, precise, devoid of the hesitation that had plagued the elite surgeons. "Scalpel." "Fine blade," she commanded, her voice steady. A resident, startled, fumbled to hand her the instrument. Adira took it, her fingers brushing the cold metal with practiced familiarity. She moved to Vargas's flank, a place the surgeons had considered stable, secondary to the internal bleeding. Her eyes, suddenly alight with a different kind of knowledge, scanned his skin, tracing lines only she could see, feeling for subtle shifts under the surface. The surgeons watched, a morbid fascination overriding their professional scorn. She wasn't preparing for a major incision, as they might have expected for pressure relief. Instead, she made a series of incredibly shallow, almost artistic nicks, barely breaking the skin, along a specific meridian on Vargas's side. It wasn't a cut, it was a precise mapping, a release. Then, with an astonishing swiftness, she pressed down, not with force, but with an intelligent, targeted pressure using the heel of her hand and then her thumb, along a point near his rib cage. Her touch was firm yet gentle, an almost therapeutic manipulation, not the aggressive intervention they were accustomed to. She spoke, not to them, but to Vargas, her voice a soft, hypnotic rhythm. "Breathe, General. Just breathe. Let it go." For a horrifying moment, nothing happened. The flat line persisted, mocking their desperate gamble. Castillo clenched his jaw, already anticipating the "I told you so." Kaito's eyes narrowed, searching for any flicker of change. Then, subtly, almost imperceptibly, a change began. The harsh, persistent flat line on the monitor gave a tiny blip, then another, a hesitant heartbeat trying to re-establish its rhythm. Vargas's chest, which had been still, gave a shallow, involuntary heave. It wasn't strong, but it was there. Castillo gasped, a sound of disbelief. Kaito leaned forward, his analytical mind struggling to reconcile what he was seeing with everything he knew. Adira, still focused, shifted her pressure point slightly, her movements economical, confident. The blips on the monitor grew stronger, more regular, like a distant drum finding its beat. A single drop of crimson, rich and dark, welled from one of the tiny nicks she'd made, a testament to the internal pressure she was manipulating. It wasn't the gush they were fighting internally, it was a controlled, almost therapeutic release. Adira glanced up, her eyes meeting Castillo's, a quiet triumph in their depths. "The drain is clearing," she murmured, her voice calm amidst the renewed, albeit weak, beeping of the monitor. "We need to stabilize the core now, while the cascade is easing." The surgeon stared, dumbfounded. It was impossible. It defied every textbook, every protocol. Yet, before their very eyes, the general, minutes from death, was showing faint, undeniable signs of life. The flatline was gone, replaced by a weak but steady rhythm. They had watched her perform something that looked less like surgery and more like a high-stakes, medical alchemy. And it was working. The air in the OR, thick with the scent of antiseptics and the metallic tang of fear, seemed to hold its breath. The weak, fluttering beep of the monitor, so recently a death knell, now echoed with a fragile promise. It was still faint, barely there, but it was there. The flat line, the terrifying silence, had retreated. Adira, her gaze still locked with Castillo's, didn't wait for permission. Her voice, though soft, cut through the residual tension like a perfectly sharpened scalpel. "Dr. Kaito, prepare a vasopressor drip, minimal dose. Dr. Castillo, prepare for a sterile closure. We need to maintain this equilibrium. The internal pressure is stabilizing, but the systemic shock is profound." She moved with an almost ethereal grace, her hand still inside the general's body, guiding, adjusting, her touch feather-light yet utterly precise. She wasn't just directing, she was conducting, a maestro orchestrating a symphony of survival. The tiny nicks she'd made had begun to close slightly, a testament to the success of her unconventional approach. The crimson bead had ceased, leaving behind a faint, almost invisible trace. The monitor's blips, previously like an erratic heartbeat of a dying bird, began to find a rhythm. Slowly, steadily, it strengthened, a persistent drumbeat of life. Castillo and Kaito, still reeling from the impossible turnaround, moved on instinct, their years of training kicking in despite their utter bewilderment. They were following orders from a rookie nurse, and yet, the general was living. The undeniable proof was there, starkly visible on the screens. The color in Vargas's face, which had been a ghastly, ashen gray, was beginning to warm, a faint blush creeping back into his cheeks. His chest, which had been heaving erratically, settled into a more even, if still shallow, rise and fall. A collective sigh, barely audible, swept through the room from the observation gallery. The tension that had held every single person captive for what felt like an eternity began to fracture, releasing a wave of dizzying relief. Nurses wiped away unbidden tears. Respiratory therapists, their shoulders hunched in despair moments before, straightened, a flicker of hope igniting in their eyes. Adira's focus was absolute. She felt the subtle shift within Vargas, the deep, internal current she had fought so hard to redirect, finally flowing in a path that led away from oblivion. Her fingers, a direct extension of her will, worked with a delicate precision born of countless desperate moments in improvised field hospitals, under fire, with only her instincts to guide her. She recalled the faint hum of a distant helicopter, the acrid smell of dust and cordite, the desperate pleas of soldiers clutching their wounds. This sterile ore, for a brief moment, became those battlefields, and she, Spectra, was once again in command. "Stabilized," she murmured, pulling her hands back, her expression unreadable. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it resonated with an authority that left no room for doubt. "The cascade is arrested. The internal pressure is normalizing. He's still critical, but he's stable. His body can begin to heal now." The silence that followed was profound, weighty with disbelief and dawning awe. Castillo, usually so quick with a cutting remark, could only stare. His chest felt lighter than it had in hours, a crushing weight lifted. Kaito, meticulous and rigid, found his carefully constructed world of protocols momentarily shattered. Yet, In the wreckage, there was a profound sense of gratitude. They had witnessed something truly extraordinary. Then, Castillo moved. Not to bark an order, but to approach the monitor, his gaze sweeping over the numbers, confirming the impossible. He turned back to Adira, his eyes, usually cold and imperious, now held a bewildered respect, a grudging admiration that was, for him, monumental. "Nurse Diallo," he began, his voice rough and used to such an admission. He cleared his throat, struggling to find the words. What you just did, it was unprecedented." Kaito, equally stunned, nodded slowly. "Beyond anything in any textbook, any simulation. You saved his life." There was no skepticism now, only a raw, honest acknowledgement. The dismissal, the arrogance, the professional pride that had walled them off from her expertise, crumbled in the face of such undeniable, life-saving skill. Adira met their gazes, a flicker of something deeply personal passing through her eyes, not triumph, not pride, but a profound, weary satisfaction. The burden she had carried, the hidden identity, the expertise she'd suppressed, had finally been unleashed for a purpose that mattered. General Vargas, her comrade from a past life, was safe. That was her only victory. A wave of exhaustion, deep and bone-weary, washed over her, now that the adrenaline was finally receding. She felt a lightness in her chest, a profound sense of emotional catharsis. The whispers she'd been ignored as, the rookie nurse who knew nothing, had been silenced. Replaced now by the resounding, steady beat of a life she had saved. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Adira Diallo, Spectra, truly felt she could breathe. The hospital still buzzed with urgency, but the immediate crisis had passed, leaving behind the powerful, undeniable resonance of a miracle. The sterile air of the OR, moments ago thick with panic and the scent of desperation, now hummed with a different kind of energy, a profound, stunned silence. Dr. Castillo's gloved hands, which had been frantic just minutes prior, now rested against his chest, his eyes fixed on Adira with an unreadable intensity. Dr. Kaito, typically so composed, had let out a shaky breath, his shoulders slumping as if he'd been holding them rigid for hours. Around them, the scrub nurses and anesthesiologists exchanged wide-eyed glances, their faces etched with a mixture of disbelief and dawning awe. General Vargas's vitals were stabilizing. The erratic lines on the monitor were smoothing out, a steady, rhythmic pulse now echoing through the room. The bleeding had stopped. Adira, still with her hands hovering near Vargas, as if ready to spring back into action, felt a profound tremor run through her. It wasn't triumph that swelled within her, but a wave of immense, bone-deep relief, followed by a quiet, almost melancholic satisfaction. The general was safe. She had done what she was trained to do, not for commendation, but for a life. Dr. Castillo was the first to break the silence, his voice a gravelly whisper, utterly devoid of its usual arrogance. "Nurse Diallo, what? How did you know to do that?" His gaze wasn't dismissive now, it was piercing, searching, as if trying to reconcile the unassuming rookie with the tactical genius who had just orchestrated a miracle. Adira lowered her hand slowly, her movements deliberate. Her focus remained on Vargas, a silent promise in her eyes. "General Vargas, he sustained these injuries in highly volatile combat zones, Dr. Castillo," she began, her voice soft but clear, carrying a subtle authority no one had ever heard from her before. "The type of internal trauma, the way old scar tissue can fragment under extreme stress, it requires a different approach. Standard protocols, while excellent for typical cases, sometimes don't account for the unique physiology of a body pushed beyond conventional limits." She paused, then added simply, "I've seen it before." Dr. Kaito stepped closer, his analytical mind already sifting through the data. The precise pressure points, the unconventional rerouting of blood flow, it was highly unconventional, utterly against protocol, yet flawlessly effective. Your knowledge of human anatomy, of specific biomechanical responses to extreme trauma, it's far beyond what any standard nursing curriculum teaches. He wasn't questioning her right to act anymore, he was questioning the source of her knowledge. Adira finally looked up, meeting their gazes directly. Her dark eyes, usually downcast or observant, held a newfound depth. My background isn't typical, doctors, she admitted, her voice still humble, but with an underlying current of quiet strength. Before Vanguard, I served in specialized medical units. Covert operations. The environments were often austere, resources scarce, and the injuries unprecedented. We had to improvise, adapt, understand the body's breaking points and its remarkable capacity for resilience in ways traditional medicine rarely encounters. As she spoke, the pieces began to click into place for the stunned team. The whispers of Spectra from the dying general, the almost superhuman calm under pressure, the encyclopedic knowledge of highly specific trauma patterns. It wasn't just a revelation of qualifications, it was a revelation of a different kind of life. A life forged in the crucible of extreme danger, where split-second decisions meant life or death, where protocols were written in blood, not textbooks. They saw not just a nurse, but a warrior, a healer who had walked through fire and emerged with an almost mythical skill set. Dr. Castillo ran a hand over his tired face. The weight of his earlier dismissiveness pressed on him, heavy and undeniable. He had scorned her, belittled her, almost let a general die because of his own pride. Specialized units, covert ops. He murmured, the words tasting strange on his tongue. You were a combat medic? Adira nodded, a flicker of something ancient and deeply personal in her eyes. More than that. I was trained to be the last resort. To understand the human body as a battlefield, and to fight for it with every available tool, every ounce of intuition. Spectra was my call sign. It referred to my ability to see beyond the obvious, to operate effectively in the shadows, to make the impossible possible when conventional light failed. She didn't say it with pride, but with a quiet, almost reverent acknowledgement of the heavy mantle she had once worn. It was a part of her essence, not just a job title. The transformation in the room was palpable. The air, once filled with professional tension, now vibrated with profound respect. The scrub nurses, who had previously only seen Adira as the quiet new hire, now saw her as a living legend. Dr. Kaito, ever the scientist, looked at her with an intellectual hunger, recognizing a master of her craft. And Dr. Castillo, the proud chief surgeon, felt a humbling, undeniable shift within himself. He hadn't just been proven wrong, he had been shown a new dimension of human capability, delivered by the most unassuming person he knew. Adira, despite the sudden, overwhelming validation, remained grounded. Her gaze returned to the steady rhythm of Vargas's heart monitor. For her, the accolades, the sudden recognition, were secondary. The true validation lay in the fact that General Vargas was breathing, alive, and on the path to recovery. The burden of her hidden identity, the expertise she'd suppressed to fit into the hospital's rigid hierarchy, had finally been unleashed for a purpose that mattered. General Vargas, her comrade from a past life, was safe. That was her only victory, and in that moment, it was everything. General Mateo Vargas's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Within days, the rapid deterioration that had gripped him receded, replaced by a steady, if slow, climb back to health. The subtle flush returned to his cheeks, the shallow breathing deepened, and eventually, he opened his eyes, clear and sharp, recognizing Adira instantly. Their first interaction, quiet and brief, was charged with unspoken understanding. A firm grip of his hand, a knowing nod from him, and the ghost of a grateful smile told Adira everything she needed to know. Their shared past, once a secret burden, was now a silent bond of respect. The Vanguard Medical Center, a bastion of rigid hierarchy, found itself undergoing a seismic, albeit subtle, shift. Adira Diallo, the rookie nurse who once navigated its corridors like a shadow, was now a figure of profound interest and respect. Her name, once lost in the daily census, became a hushed byword for extraordinary skill. Doctors paused to ask her opinion, nurses sought her advice, and even administrators, usually detached from the clinical floor, inquired about her background. Opportunities, once unattainable, began to present themselves. A proposition from Dr. Kaito to assist in developing new, interdisciplinary trauma protocols. A discreet inquiry from the hospital board about her interest in heading a specialized rapid response unit, merging conventional medicine with unconventional tactics. Adira, no longer bound by the need to conform, began to explore these avenues, her quiet confidence now empowered by profound validation. The transformation in Dr. Castillo was perhaps the most profound. The veneer of his arrogance had cracked, revealing a more reflective, perhaps even humble, core. He hadn't lost his surgical prowess, but he had gained a crucial understanding. Expertise could manifest in unexpected forms, from unexpected places. His interactions with Adira, initially marked by grudging acknowledgement, evolved into genuine professional respect. He began to consult her on complex cases, not just for her unique insight into pressure points or anatomical anomalies, but for her intuitive problem-solving. He found himself challenging long-held assumptions, even encouraging junior staff to think outside established protocols, a radical departure for the fiercely traditional chief surgeon. He had learned that true leadership wasn't just about command, but about recognizing and elevating talent, even when it challenged his own preconceptions. The experience had chipped away at his pride, leaving behind a more empathetic and open-minded physician. Dr. Kaito, ever the scientist, approached Adira with a renewed intellectual vigor. His skepticism had not vanished entirely, but it had transmuted into a rigorous, almost academic curiosity. He saw in Adira not just a skilled medic, but a living repository of undocumented, high-stakes knowledge. He proposed research initiatives, eager to formalize and integrate her battlefield techniques into modern medical practice. For Kaito, Adira represented the frontier where art met science, where intuition honed by dire circumstances provided answers that algorithms could not. He pushed for her to teach, to share her insights with others, recognizing that her unique perspective could redefine emergency medicine. Their collaboration, born from crisis, promised a future of innovation. Adira, for her part, found an immense sense of liberation. The weight of her hidden identity, the constant suppression of her true capabilities, lifted like a heavy cloak. She no longer had to diminish her voice or mask her observations. She could be Adira Diallo, the compassionate nurse, and Spectra, the brilliant combat medic, simultaneously. Her quiet demeanor remained, but it was now underpinned by an unshakable inner strength. She found joy in mentoring other nurses, and sharing her wisdom, not just medically, but in the power of trusting one's instincts and speaking up, even when unheard. Her life became an authentic tapestry woven from her past and her present, her military rigor complementing her nursing empathy. The Vanguard Medical Center, once a place where status defined worth, slowly began to foster a culture of genuine meritocracy. The incident with General Vargas became a legend whispered in the halls, a testament to the fact that heroism could be found in the most unassuming corners, and that the most profound wisdom often came from unexpected sources. It was a place where hidden potential was now actively sought out, where collaboration transcended hierarchy, and where the human element, intuition, courage, and a willingness to challenge the status quo, was finally given its due. In the quiet aftermath, General Vargas, fully recovered and ready for discharge, sought Adira out. He extended his hand, his eyes conveying a depth of gratitude words could not capture. "Spectra," he murmured, his voice strong, "you never cease to amaze me." Adira met his gaze, a rare, gentle smile gracing her lips. "General," she replied, "it was an honor, as always." As Adira walked the gleaming corridors, a new purpose resonated within her. She was no longer just a nurse in an elite hospital, she was a catalyst for change, a living embodiment of the truth that true strength lies not just in what you are, but in the courage to reveal who you are. Her journey was a beacon of hope, reminding everyone that authentic passion, when unleashed, has the power to heal not just bodies, but the very spirit of an institution, inspiring profound and lasting human growth in all who witnessed it. Adira's journey reminds us that true strength often lies hidden, waiting for the moment to emerge and inspire change. What part of Adira's incredible transformation resonated most with you? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by her courage, please consider subscribing to join our growing global community. Your support helps us bring more inspiring and impactful stories like Adira's to life, celebrating human resilience and the power of authenticity. Thank you so much for watching, for being a part of our journey, and for valuing the narratives we share. Together, we can explore countless more tales of discovery and profound human growth.